Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to answer an age-old question.
Why are sitcoms no longer as good as they used to be? It might have something to do with the fact that the genre as a whole is shifting away from being for adults, and networks are releasing shows with target audiences of children and adolescents over teens and adults. Television in general is one of the largest and most popular mediums of entertainment media. This is of course in part due to the expert writers and creators who work on these shows and attempt to be relatable to audiences by mirroring societal values and culture through their content. As television grew as a medium, genre trends evolved alongside these same society values, and the type of content/characters portrayed within these shows also started to change and grow. Sitcoms, or situational comedy, is just one example of a particularly popular genre of television. They are known to be family shows, and generally are appealing to audiences of all ages and types. This genre emerged around the 1950s as networks were transitioning from radio shows to television shows. And as it grew in popularity, this time period of between the 1950s to 1960s was referred to as the golden age of television, largely due to the popularity of sitcoms such as I Love Lucy, The Honeymooners, and many more. Sitcoms are designed in a very specific way to promote the idea of flow, which Raymond Williams, the author of The Technology and Society, states is the primary organizing principle of television. The fluid combination of program segments, commercials, and other material that makes up the experience of watching television. There are three main design components attributed to sitcoms, the first being a cold open or teaser. They prompt the audience to pay attention to what's happening on screen and keep them wanting more. The second design component is the general layout of sitcom episodes. Most, if not all, tend to follow a 3-act structure. In the first act, a problem or situation related to one of the characters arises and needs to be addressed. In the second act, as the characters attempt to solve the problem, they find themselves only making it worse. In the third and final act, eventually they find some kind of solution and the episode resolutes in a restoration of the status quo. Of course, the third design component is the jokes embedded within every scene. They give sitcoms their lighthearted nature and serve to ease the tension within the scenes.
Yes, that would have made more sense.
In their work, The Culture Industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception, Theodore Adorno and Max Horkheimer state how formalized the procedure is can be seen when the mechanically differentiated products prove to be all alike in the end. This almost formulaic approach to sitcom episodes is very similar to the objective they wish to convey within their essay, and how writers tend to follow the same formula as every other show, and for this reason eventually end up with the very same similar concepts and plots as other shows. While this organizational style allows viewers to indulge in the humor of everyday life, it also limits a realistic portrayal of actual society, as it is very rare that these types of shows can authentically mimic a person's life. Sitcoms often serve as an escape for viewers with one-dimensional and static characters. The predictability within these characters and the beginning to end plot lines of each episode allow viewers to easily digest this type of content without ever really scratching the surface beyond this predetermined formalized procedure. In the book, Understanding Media and Culture by Jake Lowell, he speaks about the evolution of the kinds of themes TV shows depicted based on real-life events occurring during the time in American society. Prior to sitcoms, in the 1950s, there existed domestic comedies, which were generic family comedies with character-based humor that depicted an idealized version of American family life. This mostly consisted of a portrayal of white, middle class, and nuclear families. This was because representation of the masses was not a widely known or accepted concept at the time. However, fast forward 20 years, and during the 1950s, broadcasters began to diversify families on their shows to reflect changing societal attitudes towards formerly controversial issues such as single parenthood and divorce. Sitcoms as a genre came and went throughout television history, while networks and creators attempted to keep up with growing viewership and maintain relatability with the societal values. Recently, as viewers' tastes have evolved, sitcoms are starting to take even more of a backseat to dramatic storylines that go against this formulaic nature of situational humor. And it is becoming obvious that sitcoms meant for adults will soon become a thing of the past. As the television industry grew more capitalistic, it became harder to find fresh ideas that kept viewers interested for a longer period of time. As Horkheimer and Adorno state, the technical media are relentlessly forced into uniformity. After the same type of shows being released one after the other, and subsequently canceled after only 1 or 2 seasons, it becomes more obvious why adults started to wean off sitcoms and why networks started to move away from releasing sitcoms geared towards adults as a whole. As viewership grew, networks began narrowing the type of content they released in order to meet the needs and interests of an increasingly fragmented audience, as Lowell states in his book. People were able to find shows based on their individual taste as the subject matter of broadcasting became more diversified. Adults were able to indulge in news, sports, and more mature content, while children had cartoons and much less mature content available to them. In general, the genre of sitcoms became more geared toward children as networks and creators became able to recycle ideas and concepts as generations passed. An incredibly popular trope amongst sitcoms is the found family or friendship trope, because it gave writers an easy way to define character relationships, and it was a concept that resonated with both adults and children. However, it became harder for networks to release sitcoms with these type of tropes without adult audiences feeling like the shows were copycats of previously released shows or just bored by the cliche characters presented within them. As children outgrew these types of shows and stopped watching shows on networks with an intended audience of children in general, creators were able to take these pre-existing show concepts, rebrand them, and release them as a new show to younger generations. For example, take the show The Nanny. It was originally aired in 1993 on CBS, and it was about a woman who, after being fired from her job as a cosmetic saleswoman and dumped by her boyfriend, finds a job as a nanny to 3 kids of a rich widowed Englishman. They also have a sarcastic butler and a comical business partner as part of the cast. Does this perhaps sound familiar to another show concept? This is because the creator of the show, Pamela O'Connell, also created the show Jessie, which was released in 2015, over 20 years after The Nanny, on Disney Channel. Jessie was about a small-town teen who moves to New York to pursue her dreams of becoming an actress, and instead finds herself working as a nanny to 4 kids of a rich, never-at-home couple, and in the company of a lazy butler. The main difference between the two shows is that Jessie was a show about kids for kids. Disney Channel as a whole is a network that is geared more towards children, and this is obvious when the main character in Jessie is supposed to be a teenager, therefore more relatable to an audience of mostly children, over The Nanny, where the main character is an adult. In general, the kids have much more screen time in Jessie, where in The Nanny they are viewed more as side characters. However, they are still important to the plot. So while the main concept remains, making these little changes and giving the show a new name to fit the intended demographic allows networks more possibilities to do the same with any sitcom in general. Another major difference between sitcoms in the past and comedy shows today is a lack of audience input and live viewership of these mass soundstage multicam filmings. As Philip Ostrander states in his work, liveness, performance, and mediatized culture, mediatized forms have gained the advantage in the competition for audiences between itself and live performance in the cultural marketplace. Many shows today still film in front of a live audience. However, it is not as commonly seen with adult comedies as it is with networks and shows that have a higher adolescent demographic, such as Disney Channel. These are the networks left that primarily film shows on sound stages and sets. Television reflects cultural values, and it also influences culture. By portraying controversial relationships, they are able to influence audience opinions and shape their outlooks on acceptable forms of connection. Sitcoms are a dying genre for adults, not simply because the general audience has outgrown them, but because networks find it difficult to deliver quality, out-of-the-box, humorous content to adults while still adhering to the important cultural values that are ever shifting today. They often will choose to prioritize what sells and what sells efficiently over anything else. As Adorno and Horkheimer have mentioned, a constant sameness governs the relationship to the past as well. What is new about the phase of mass culture compared with the late liberal stage is the exclusion of the new. The older a target demographic is for a show, the harder it is to sell because adults are much more aware of their sense of humor, and this also causes them to make more frequent connections between shows and compare them when they are really not all that similar. For example, the sitcom How I Met Your Mother was pretty popular upon release because it had a unique theme and execution, but is often compared with Friends due to the heavy role that the friends of the main character play in the plot as a whole. Despite not having any direct similarities, because it was released so soon after the end of Friends, viewers and other networks were not able to escape the shadow and high expectations audiences had about sitcoms after Friends. In contrast, kids shows are able to be recycled more often, even with similar storylines, because the target demographic of these shows tends to cycle through generations of audiences much faster than those of adult-centered shows, and recycled concepts go unnoticed much longer, if at all. In conclusion, the most possible future for sitcoms is inevitably a takeover by the dramedy genre, as there is more creative freedom for creators within this genre and has audiences feeling satisfied for longer, unlike sitcoms, and more than likely, the genre as a whole will shift to be solely for children over adults. Thank you!